I'm going to explore adding effects to layers and also the use of adjustment layers in our compositions. I've got some footage that I'm going to use. I'll give you the links to that. Feel free to substitute this footage with some still images if you want to work a little quicker. I am going to import. I'm going to start off by importing my footage into my project window. And if I go to the desktop, I've prepared those videos. I'm going to import them as footage, bring them all in. Then I'm going to start up a new composition to work in. I'm going to work in a portrait mode for this demonstration, 1080 by 920, 1920 high, and around about 4 seconds, but it doesn't matter if it's a bit longer. And I'm going to click OK and have a look at that comp. Looking pretty good. Okay, so a few things to kind of get us set up, I suppose. I'm going to add my various bits of footage, kind of layer them up, and yeah, start adding some effects. Sorry, just checking which bits of footage I've got here and which I'm going to add first, or the order in which I'm going to add them. I'm going to change the name of my composition. Alright, and I'll just drag all of those into the timeline, and we'll arrange them, rearrange them as necessary. So the clouds are at the top, that's good. I might put this guy down the bottom, and that's going to be our background. And then swap over the order of those two. So the order is clouds, sea, beach, fire, and then this texture at the back. Let me resize some of this stuff. I don't know what size files you downloaded. I think this file here is a pretty high definition one, so I'm going to just scale that down and flip it around so that it fits like so. I think the other ones here are, let me have a look at this one. Oh yeah, this one's big too, so I might, yeah, bring it down in size. I'll even rotate that one. We can leave the beach like that, and we can also leave the clouds like so. Okay, so it's likely that you've probably already had a dabble with adding effects to your layers. It's a very simple and easy kind of process. There are lots of effects that we can use in After Effects to apply to all sorts of different media types. Some of those effects are very specific tools for processing video. Some of them are image adjustment tools like we've got in Photoshop. Some of them are distortion tools. Some of them are generative tools for generating particle effects and so on. There's a couple of ways that you can implement an effect on a layer. The quickest thing that you can, well, you'll have seen the effects menu up here, and when we have a look at that, we can see a whole bunch of options for us to use there. I'm going to start with a color correction tool, something that's probably familiar to us, Hue and Saturation. So when I add Hue and Saturation, you can see that my effects control panel appears top left here, and you'll see now that when I twirl down my layer, I've got an effects kind of option under there. I can twirl down my effects, and I can apply lots of different effects to a layer, multiple effects to a layer, and they kind of stack up on top of each other. I'll do that in a second. Okay, so hue and saturation, we know that we can adjust the hue and saturation. I'm going to desaturate this image. Primarily what I want to do with that, make it black and white. Let's add another effect there, and maybe we'll go ahead and add another one that we're familiar with, levels, so where we can adjust the tonal range, and I'm going to apply a bit more contrast. You can see that's occurring in our on our canvas to our footage, and you can see now that I've got two effects stacking up on top of each other in the layers palette, and also in my effects and controls panel. You can see that I've got options to each of those there. I can turn them on and off, and I can delete them if I want to, like so. And I can also adjust the order with which I apply those effects to the footage, and often that has, quite significant effects. Okay, I'm going to apply another effect, something we probably haven't looked at before. And this is by no means an extensive look at all of the effects available to us. It's just a quick kind of sample of some of our, very brief sample of some of our options. I'm going to apply the sphere, CC sphere under perspective to our footage there, and that does a kind of particular thing, kind of a pseudo 3D effect, where it kind of wraps our footage around a sphere. Very good for making moons and planets, etc. Now we have some options that we can adjust here, some variables that we can change. We can change the rotation of our sphere. What else can we do? Change the radius. We can make it a little bit bigger or smaller. Offset it, and we can also change the lighting effects. Make the lighting a little bit more intense or not. That'll do for this layer here, and I'm going to rename this layer. I don't know. Okay, so that's our first layer that we've applied a series of effects to. Let's add some more effects. A little bit of setup I want to do here, create a few masks so that these preceding layers have some transparency to them, so that we can see through the layer stack. So I'm going to select that layer, and I'm going to rename this layer Ring 1, and this one's going to be called, I'm just hitting return on the keyboard there, by the way, and that allows me to change the footage or the name of that layer. Just becomes a bit easier to manage. I'm going to add a mask to each of these, and it's going to be an elliptical mask. And what I'm going to do, so I'll just hide my ball layer for a sec, selecting ring, making sure I've got the ellipse, and then I'm going to hit, I think it's Command and Shift, go right to the center of that layer, and you can see I can create a mask, elliptical mask that grows from the center. So something like that. So now I can see through the layer stack, and I'll just bring back, I can see through the layer stack across those three layers. You can see I've applied a mask there. Very quickly, I'm going to add another effect to this ring, just to change its color a bit. I'm going to use a color correction tool called Tint. Tint is like a gradient map in Photoshop. I can map all of my dark colors to a particular tone, and I think I might go for a dark red. And I can map all my light colors to another color. Nice kind of quick way of adding a graphic effect to that footage. Okay, good. Now, continuing the bit more setup, I'm going to make another mask on ring 2. So I'm going to start from the center, holding Command and Shift down, so I can create another ring there so I can see all the way through to that background layer. So I can see all 4 of my layers. Because what I want to do is I want to add what's called an adjustment layer. And now an adjustment layer is a kind of an invisible layer. When we add an adjustment layer, you can't really kind of see anything. But what we can do with an adjustment layer is we can apply effects and presets to that adjustment layer, and it will cause those effects to cascade onto the layers below. Let me add an adjustment layer. Under the Layers menu, New, and Adjustment Layer, Command-Shift-Y. We can't really see anything change on our canvas, but we can see in the layers stack there's a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to rename it. I don't know. I'm going to call it Distort because I'm going to add a distortion effect to that layer. All right, let's do that. So with our adjustment layer selected, we can go up to our effects, and I'm going to go to, I think it's Distort, and select Turbulent Displace. Now it might also be, probably should have done this earlier, but we can also access our plugins and effects through the Effects and Presets panel, and that's quite useful when you know the effect that you want to apply, because you can search for it. So I'm going to search for Displace, and you can see that Turbulent Displace comes up under the Distort options there. So I could like double click that, or I could drag that onto my adjustment layer, and you can see that by adding that distortion effect, it's affecting all 3 of those layers that are underneath there, ring 1, ring 2, and this one here, which I'm going to call background. Just select the distort layer again. You can see up in the effects and controls, I have turbulent displace here, and this is a kind of a rippling kind of effect that you can see what's happening there, causes a distortion. Increase the amount of distortion, I can get some kind of psychedelic effects. I don't want too much. I think I'm just going to go with the default of 50 for amount. One thing that I want to do and point out is that effects are animatable over time, so we can keyframe most of the values inside our effect. So for example, I'm going to keyframe the evolution value here in this plugin, and that's going to animate that distort effect. So I'm going to twirl down here and find my effect. Also, hitting E on the keyboard will show our effects if you need to save a bit of space in your timeline. So I'm going to animate the evolution. So I'm going to add a keyframe. So at the start of the animation, I will add a keyframe by hitting that little stopwatch, and then I'm going to move to the end of the animation, or ahead in time, and increase the value here so that the evolution is going to be 2 revolutions, and you'll see that that's changed that over time. And if I preview that, So I just paused there for a second while a couple of frames cached, but you can see how our distort adjustment layer, or the layer that I've called distort, our adjustment layer, is causing that effect to distort those 3 layers underneath it there. So ring 1, ring 2, and the background are all being affected by the turbulent displace effect that I've put above it, which is really, really helpful and quite powerful. Now, adjustment layers, if I turn the adjustment layer off, you'll see that no longer is that effect taking place. So it's really kind of neat and quite non-destructive. There's a few kind of strategies if I wanted to not have it not affect the background layer. I could set up some alpha mats, or I could simply select those 3 elements and pre-compose them. So the adjustment layer and the 2 layers underneath, and if I pre-compose them together into their own composition, you'll see now that the background layer isn't affected by that adjustment layer. Adjustment layers are editable in themselves. Let me set up a new one, a new adjustment layer. I'll put it right up the top, and I'll quickly add some curves. Be familiar with curves, and this is going to affect everything. Should affect everything. Here we go. Yep. Just wasn't updating for some reason. Everything underneath there, so all of the layers from the adjustment layer at the top, and I'll just change that to so an adjustment layer has all of its own kind of transform properties, so I can move it around and scale it, etc. And importantly, I can change its opacity over time, like so. So I can drop the opacity to 0, and you can see that the adjustment layer is invisible there, but when I move it up to this point here, if it renders or caches, you can see that the curves is taking place, or is applied to all those layers underneath. Obviously, an adjustment layer exists in time as well, so I can change the kind of in and out points. So it doesn't exist here, but when I move into this spot here, once it renders, you'll see it affect the layers underneath. All right, so that was a quick look at a sample of effects that you can apply to your footage in After Effects. And also I'll look at implementing adjustment layers, which are a really powerful way of applying effects globally.